Luther Burden or Matthew Golden?
Matthew Golden.
Matthew Golden. Okay, so, yeah.
I really love Luther Burden too, but Golden is still in the situation, and I think it could break loose this week for him. Had his highest route participation last week. We've got Jaden Reed on IR for like another 5 weeks. So, yeah, I'm gonna go with Matthew Golden because he's already getting the playing time. I could end up being wrong on that one, like long term, but I just feel like it's Matthew Golden week this week.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. I'm Theo Gremminger, and this week we have a really fun one. Dwain McFarland returns to Dynasty Life to help us break down week 4 of fantasy football and beyond. We're going to talk about a couple of players who might pop, some sleeper players that dynasty managers need to keep their eyes on. We're also going to talk about some of the biggest performances from week 3 and a couple of rookies that we think might have their breakout performances here in week 4. Dwain, let's start it off. I mean, there's no running back that's gained more dynasty value this season and really more redraft value over a short period of time than Quinshon Judkins. We had a period of time over the summer where there was a ton of fear in the marketplace about off-the-field issues. There was no signed contract. Judkins was a really, really good prospect. We talked about him this past offseason when you did your supermodel. You came on, we talked about all this rookies, but Judkins had a lot of things that were checking off boxes for potential bell cow at the next level. Then we had all the craziness this summer. So it's sort of fantasy managers pulling their hair out what to do with this guy. Well, he returns against Baltimore. They give him 10 carries in that game. He catches 3 passes, sort of short ones. But Green Bay game, absolute breakout performance. The Green Bay defense heading into week 3 looked absolutely unstoppable, shutting down both Lions backs, both Commanders backs. Judkins ran wild and a lot of yards after contact. Where are you valuing Quinshon Judkins for the rest of the season and long term? Is he the next NFL bell cow running back in Cleveland?
Well, I think he's certainly going to be the guy that's going to handle all the early down work moving forward in Cleveland. So if you bought on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, especially in Dynasty, which is really always the move with Judkins, I understood a little bit more some of the fear some folks had about him, season long this year, just because okay, what's going to happen with his contract? Will he sign it? Because being suspended could get rid of his incentives. There's just all these layers of things we didn't know for sure. So I understood why people were pushing him down the board some in season long. But yeah, I think when you look back at the rookie supermodel, and like you said, we talked about it, he graded out just 1 point below where we had TreVeyon Henderson, who we both love. And right now, looking at what Judkins is doing, it's very similar to what we saw at Ohio State. Getting the early down work, getting the between the tackle stuff. Not saying TreVeyon can't do those things, but that's how they used Judkins, in his final year of college football at Ohio State. And to your point, just looks tremendous doing it. He handled 95% of the rushing attempts for the team in week 3, which is just absolutely insane. Now, Jerome Ford was still getting the 2-minute offense. He was still out there getting all the long down and distance work. I think eventually the 2-minute offense probably goes to Dylan Sampson. But I could see Quinshon Judkins maybe taking some of that long down and distance work, Theo, because, that's when you're going to get blitzed. That's whenever they go man coverage. It's usually 3rd and long, 4th and long. Judkins might actually be the better blocker, right, than Sampson. Yeah. And so Sampson becomes the 2-minute / change of pace back. And really, that would be a good workload for Judkins. So I think that's the biggest question. We knew that he was going to be a potentially prolific runner at the next level. We knew that he was a big yards after contact guy. But the question is, can he carve out enough of a role in the passing game to be considered, quote unquote, bell cow, right? I think he's going to get the touches on the ground. The big question is where does his value ultimately go as a receiver out of the backfield? And you just know how important that is. Whenever you deal with projection models and look at floors and ceilings, and heck, talk about a model. Everybody knows who CMC is. Everybody knows who Alvin Kamara is. Everybody knows these backs that catch passes and what a cheat code they are. That's the one question. I do think a big positive is how good the Browns defense is playing. If they can keep games close, because we know the offense overall is not that great.
Yeah, that's a really big key, because a lot of people talk about the potential game flow. Certainly you've talked about it now, where Judkins is a player that's going to have to do it with the yards on the ground. he's really profiling as a guy that we'd love to see in a perfect world. If Cleveland's offense, maybe a year from now, Judkins could project to be a 20 carry a game player. Has that kind of volume to his name, but a lot of it's going to be game flow specific. But the defense could be a real benefit to him. And in close games, I think they're going to lean on Judkins. Very tilting one here in week 4, because the Lions offense is on an absolute heater. Hung a 50 spot on Chicago, 38 against Baltimore. They're going to put a ton of pressure on Cleveland, but at the same time, can that Cleveland defense slow up Jared Goff enough to make this a Judkins game? For me, I think Judkins, from a dynasty perspective, should be moved somewhere into the RB1 rankings. I'm going to quickly kind of adjust him, but for a season-long perspective, probably a mid-level RB2. Is that about where you're valuing him, Dwain?
Yeah, I think in the games where the defense comes through, they keep the game close, you're going to get running back 1 performances. If it goes off the rails, like it could this weekend against Detroit, but people also had Green Bay as a heavy favorite over Cleveland last week. And so had you bought into that theory of, well, I better not play Judkins, obviously it was different. He had 45% of the rushing attempts heading into that game. Now he had 95%. So you're probably playing Quinshon Judkins no matter what. But yeah, I think you're about dead on. I've got him right now in my rest of season projections, which takes a ton of things into account, as the running back 19 the rest of the way. So right there where you're looking at him. I also tend to lean towards where you're at. I would say for dynasty purposes, like borderline running back 1 is where I would put him. You know, he's right there in that, like, so that's like that 10 to 14 range. If you're playing in a 12 teamer, like he could kind of end up on either side of it. But man, if he ever did lock down more passing work, he would be a top 6 guy.
Well, I'll give you sort of a litmus test here. Quinshon Judkins, or both. I'll throw them both in the same bucket. Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, Quinshon Judkins. Pick one.
I'm going to go Quinshon at this point. Yeah. Like, I mean, he just, look, I know it's some of it's recency bias, but I just loved him as a prospect. I shouldn't say loved. I really liked him as a prospect. Love usually equals you also had the passing down chops. But no, I mean, look, right now with Kenneth Walker and what we're seeing with Charbonnet, it's not very encouraging, man.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And one other, I'll give you a harder one. Second-year player, but the profile, you're talking about a day 3 profile, a smaller back, does get fantastic passing game work at times and was terrific last year as a rookie. Bucky Irving or Quinshon Judkins?
Oh, Bucky Irving.
Bucky Irving for sure.
Bucky Irving. Yeah. Bucky Irving, man, what he's doing right now. And it's so funny, right? It's the things every year we hear the narrative, Theo, of especially for these smaller backs. It really hits these smaller backs hard. Remember with Achane, it was like, oh no, he's never going to get more work. He got more work. They said it again this offseason. And guess what? He's getting even more work than he had last year. I mean, there's just so many of these guys. James Cook, same thing. Oh, he'll never get more work. Got more work last year. Guess what? Getting even more work this year. And so when you look at what Bucky Irving has already done, which is essentially just take the passing down reps right out of Rachaad White's hands. He just ripped them from his hands, and Rachaad White's really good in that capacity. Yeah. The only thing holding Bucky Irving right now back is massive casualties to the offensive line for the Buccaneers. Like he's still averaging 15.5 fantasy points per game, despite nothing as far as what he's getting from his blockers. Bucky Irving, absolutely electric. I think he's a top 6 talent.
And Tristan Wirfs will be returning this week. That should be a big help to Tampa Bay. Let's pivot over to the quarterback position, a player that I didn't necessarily think we'd be talking about from a dynasty perspective, and certainly for redraft managers, it's been like found money. Daniel Jones in dynasty startups this summer was like the guy you take as your QB3. Jones has been fantastic this year. A career renaissance in Indianapolis. Everything is sort of lined up around him, Dwain, perfectly, where he has weapons at the receiver position with Tyler Warren. Michael Pittman looks very good and rejuvenated. Jonathan Taylor, we'll talk about potentially as an RB1 overall this year. Probably the biggest bet to finish as the RB1 overall would be Taylor at this point in the season. And Jones has a strong offensive line and a strong scheme that is giving him manufactured attempts on the ground. Huge game for Indianapolis this week. Undefeated Colts go and play an LA Rams team that had that game won against Philly. And LA is one of the best teams in the NFC. Tilting game. Where are you at on Daniel Jones for this week and for the rest of the season? Is this a scenario where you think Jones could solidify himself and kind of pull a Baker Mayfield, get to Indianapolis, and just be the quarterback for maybe a few seasons?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's possible. Here's what I'll say. Like, Daniel Jones has his best supporting cast of his career. When we look at Michael Pittman, Tyler Warren, Josh Downs, even Alec Pierce just doing kind of his thing as the lid lifter on the defense. May see some Adonai Mitchell this week. And then you already talked about the offensive line, but man, the scheme. What Shane Steichen does is like such a perfect fit for a guy like Daniel Jones, who really doesn't want to push the ball down the field all the time. He wants to stay on time. And you're talking about all these RPOs. Shane Steichen, if you go back over the last 3 years, one of the league leaders in RPO calls, also in screens, play action. So doing a lot of things to really help these playmakers who are already good players in their own right, to give them extra space, right? And to make the defense just, take that split second where they've got to react to this little wrinkle that's happening right when the ball gets snapped. And that creates this space for these guys. Tyler Warren, obviously being like one of the huge recipients of it. He's got a 24% target share leading the team. So yeah, I'm a believer in Daniel Jones in this scheme with things going right. Do I think that Daniel Jones can just go to any team? Obviously, we've already seen this and be something that helps lift them. No, I think Daniel Jones is a bus driver, but it's not bad in this offense. And obviously versus what we were getting with Anthony Richardson, who could be tanking all of these weapons. That's the ripple effect, right? Is that we're actually getting value out of all these other players besides Josh Downs. And it's mostly been due to game script because they're not having to run a lot of 11 personnel. They're just leading these things. But man, when you look at Jones, he checks the boxes we want for an archetype. I put him in my, rankings article in week 1 as my sicko start of the week. So basically these are guys that are just super low rostered. And it's hey man, you need a Hail Mary. But Daniel Jones, the reason why is we buy archetypes in fantasy football. And he is the archetype of a guy because he does what he does on the ground and because he can at least be competent in the passing game in this scheme, man. He carries a very high ceiling every week and a pretty solid, and you saw his floor last week. Didn't get the rushing touchdown and still gave you 16 fantasy points. That's probably his floor unless we see this offense start to unravel. And it's already been tested by the Broncos, Theo. The way they're built and how they do all these things schematically, they're really protected from Surtain can't take away one dude and their offense is stopped. They're nah, sorry, man. We're just going to hit Tyler Warren's little RPO screen, bro. And he's going to go for 12 yards. So it's a great fit for Daniel Jones. And I do think he's a top 10 quarterback the rest of this season for sure.
Yeah, I know. I'm with you. And when you start putting that in perspective and you say he could be a top 10 quarterback, even just a QB1, even a top 15 quarterback this year, Indy's going to win games this year. They look like they're headed in the right direction. They're probably a very good bet at this point to end up with double-digit wins. They would be the pick that I think both of us would come away with to win the AFC South. He's going to box himself out organizationally from having a quarterback that Indianapolis drafts this coming draft. It's not even time to really start talking about 2026 quarterback prospects, but kind of like what we saw with Baker Mayfield in Tampa Bay, where people look at him sort of as a placeholder and then he just wins the job. Sam Darnold last year gets the opportunity and gets this contract with Seattle. Daniel Jones is sort of this year's version of those guys, really rejuvenated. If you've been rostering him in Dynasty, this is exactly what you wanted to see for Jones. And a really nice segue here to our next quarterback we're going to talk about, Jaxson Dart, who I know both of us are very, very excited to see on an NFL field. Dart had nearly 1,500 rushing yards during his time at Ole Miss. And we saw Daniel Jones in Brian Dable's first season with over 700 rushing yards in 2022. Dart has some similarities, I think, to Drake May last year in New England, where you're going to get the rushing production. The difference is he might have the most talented wide receiver in football to work with as well in Malik Neighbors. What's your level of hype right now for Jaxson Dart? Do you think he's going to make an impact this year, or is it really a long-term prospect?
No, I think he's an immediate term prospect because, again, we're back to archetypes. Averaged over 44 yards per game rushing in college. You just hit what he did. He had a 16% designed rush share at Ole Miss. This is a guy they've already been excited about just mixing him in for a few plays here or there. Why? Because of the gravitational pull he can have like on a defense as far as what he can do running. And if we go back to Brian Daboll even further, before Josh Allen was Josh Allen, right? This guy that became this accurate passer, Daboll was doing the same sort of thing with Josh Allen, even when he had accuracy woes, and really making him a fantasy viable asset before he really progressed into that next level that we know Josh Allen to be now as a passer. People forget it was kind of rough the first few years, right? And a lot of his value was based around rushing. And so when you look at Jaxson Dart, obviously he's not a top 10 NFL draft pick, right? He's going at the end of round 1. And a big part of that is due to Ole Miss and their scheme, right? And people have a lot of questions of, okay, great, you can throw to all these wide open people in this funky scheme, with Kiffin, but can you like come to the next level and really execute on these things? And while we don't have a great sample, Theo, he looked good in the preseason. I get it. You're playing against backups, but all you can do is play the people that you're playing against. And for his coaching staff to move to him this quickly over Russell Wilson after Russ threw for 450 yards in week 2 against the Cowboys, like I just think it's a big vote of confidence. And there's a lot of unknown, with how he's going to look as a passer this year. But I plugged him into the rest of season projection model. Dude, he came out as the QB 13. And I didn't give him a 16% design rusher. I gave him 13%. I gave him a 7% scramble rate. I held down his yards per attempt, because he's a rookie. Despite all those things, man, these sorts of archetypes are just the ones you want to bet on, and maybe it ends up being a miss this year, but I'll be honest. If you're carrying 2 quarterbacks on your team right now, I would much rather my QB2 be Jaxson Dart than names like Geno Smith, who I like and is playing well. I would want him over guys like Stafford and all these other names, because if it goes right, he can be more like what Daniel Jones is doing right now. And it's someone where you're basically like, okay, I need to be starting this player every single week.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. And I think you nailed it. It's the archetypes and the insulation we have in terms of fantasy scoring and the floors for these quarterbacks with quarterbacks that are mobile. I'm really excited about this one. I think Jaxson Dart also, it's kind of hard to explain, sort of that it factor where he's got the moxie to be able to handle being the quarterback in New York. A lot of the interviews were fun. It seems like this is an organization that really wants to lean into Dart as sort of the savior here. And he's probably going to save Brian Daboll's job, because there's going to be a longer leash with Daboll this year because, of course, it's a rookie quarterback. So really, really a fun one. Dwain, what do you have going on this time of year? Everybody knows you. They're following you. What's a week look like for Dwain McFarland? You're dropping a lot of articles, a lot of free ones over there on Fantasy Life.
Sunday to Wednesday is it's known as the grind, right, around my house. My wife's basically on Sunday around 2:30 or so, because I start diving into all of those games, because Theo, how we have to stay ahead, and she's like, all right, see you Thursday. So Sunday night, I'm doing the recap show with Ian Hartitz, and we usually finish that up around 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. So that everybody has it for their commute in the next morning for their drive in. And then I'm writing the utilization report on Monday, which is basically just looking at all the latest trends from a usage perspective, looking at efficiency and everything else as well. Now have the utilization score. So man, a big focus for me, honestly, over the last 3 seasons has been what really matters, which data points really matter. There's a lot of data points that I love and I get into them and they get talked about a lot. But at the end of the day, it's interesting, but it doesn't really matter for fantasy. It's not predictive. It doesn't do anything. It's cool and it's fun to talk about. So I've really tried to streamline things into the data points that I do believe matter the most based on all the testing that I've done. And so the utilization score is kind of a culmination of that. Obviously, there's no perfect stat in fantasy, and we never will have one. There's just so much. But it really does a nice job of bringing everything together around the player's talent profile, as well as what their role has looked like, over the previous weeks. So that's a big thing. And then obviously working on rankings and projections all day Tuesday, and then Wednesdays, I usually finish up a rankings risers and fallers column, and it's just wrapped all around like the guys that are moving the most up the ranks or the guys that are falling the most down the ranks. You know, all the factors like injuries on the team, player trends, maybe it's stuff from the utilization that we're seeing, maybe it's a matchup kind of thing. And then you have certain players that like they just check all those boxes. And of course, those are the best, like when we can get the ones that check all the boxes.
Yeah, your work is fantastic, Dwain, and it's been a pleasure sort of podcasting with one another throughout like your rise. You getting to this point at Fantasy Life, very, very cool stuff to see. And I think you do a very good job of taking high level statistics and breaking them down in a way that is very easy to consume and understand. One of the players you wrote about this week that I've been sort of pounding the table for. And we podcasted with Matthew Berry this offseason. He came on with Scott and I. His ride or die player, Omarion Hampton, a player that I have a really gross amount of exposure to this year, Dwain, when it comes to, I don't even want to say it. Shout out IRS. I'm not even going to say how much Omarion Hampton I have right now across redraft and dynasty teams, but it's a lot. And the first 2 weeks of the season, I had a little sweat going. I was taking a couple of shots here. Yeah, Theo, thanks for telling me to draft all that Omarion Hampton. Well, week 3 comes along and Hampton looks fantastic. Now, I understand Najee Harris goes down for the season, but that's football. Guys go down with injuries. And the utilization for Omarion Hampton took a really, really big leap. And we finally saw him utilized as a pass catcher. And this was an important game for LA. They come from behind. They beat Denver. This means a lot here. Talk about what you've seen from Hampton, your expectations for him moving forward.
Yeah. So like Hampton, I've watched all of his carries too, and I see a lot of the criticism that he gets. Like he's not as creative as a runner as like a Bucky Irving or some of these other players. He's more of like, if the hole's there, like he's going to do his thing. If not, he's probably getting like 2 yards. But I also think that people are being overly, critical, right, of some of these younger players. If you go back and you look historically, so I had the great Ryan Heath from Fantasy Points over on Fantasy Life last week for the Talk Data to Me show, which I do every Friday. And we talked about all these rookies, and that was just about how efficiency can be so fluky in these early weeks. And there really is an acclimation period. So like I just went and compared like over the last 10 years, rookies and what round they went in the NFL draft, and these round 1 guys from the first 2 weeks to just looking at them over the rest of the season, they improved 20%. And so with Hampton, I get it. I'm with you. Like, is Najee a bit of a bailout card for him? Yes. But when you draft these young players like this, you have to understand. Now, it doesn't always happen. Like you can be Malik Neighbors and go bonkers right away at the beginning of the year. But quite often we do have a little bit of a ramp up time, especially for the running backs. So I think even if Najee was still healthy, he might not have had the immediate bailout card. But the thesis was still there with Hampton, like a really good prospect, round 1 pick. He's got the size, everything that the Chargers are looking for. I think it's really interesting what you brought up, because he did have a 96 utilization score last week. That's on a scale of 0 to 100. So obviously that's just, if you guys, just go back to your childhood years and, you would prefer to get a 96 on your test, not a 75, not a 50. So when you look at what he did as a receiver, a 15% target share in that game, I would say this, like number one, like it's good because he's staying on the field now for passing down reps. So what that means is at any point you could get more of a spike game like that from Omarion Hampton. But when you have Quintoin Johnston playing the way he is, which is, a pretty big surprise, honestly, to everyone. And then you still have Ladd McConkey, who is going to do his thing. And then Keenan Allen just doesn't go away. And so you're probably not going to have a lot of games where he gets that sort of target look. And now we got, Gadsden the second doing his thing as well. So I look at it as like, we're probably still going to need to get there, Theo, on the ground. But like, is there an offense that you're more excited about like than the Chargers? I think they're locked easily top 5. Like if you were to poll everyone across the league, there could be a boatload of touchdowns here for Omarion Hampton. So I love him. I think, obviously he scored 25 fantasy points last week. But I think he's in a great spot.
Yeah, it's a great point you made about the Chargers, and people might say, I'm not sure about that, but the schedule eases up a ton, and they get by the gauntlet that is the first 3 games of the season, getting all AFC West opponents going 3-0 against them, including a come from behind win against Denver and that win over Kansas City, which was just a huge hurdle for them to overcome in that environment in Brazil. I think you could see some really big scoring weeks from LA in the upcoming weeks. Let's expand on some of these Chargers, though. You mentioned Quinton Johnston, and I traded for him in a dynasty league this week, Dwain. And shout out to Austin Martin, Dan Williamson, two really good high stakes players.
Yeah,
I split some teams with Dan, and Austin and I talk regularly. Two of the better FFPC dynasty guys. We were kind of talking about it, and I was trying to play catch up on Quinton Johnston because I don't have a whole lot of him in dynasty. And to me, this feels like a big breakout season from him. Goes from sort of a punchline as a rookie, and now he has caught all these touchdowns, looked really good against Patrick Surtain. He's only 24 years old, and this seems like a Harbaugh special. Harbaugh seems to really like Quinton Johnston. You go back to that TCU game where Johnston shredded Michigan, and it's been a complete turnaround with him under Harbaugh. But there's still dynasty managers with apprehension when it comes to him. Where are you at on him for the rest of the season and just his maturation as a professional, looking back to where he was to where he is now?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I have not had a chance to go back and watch him against Surtain. I have watched all of that's kind of on my list today. Like, I usually keep a list of players where the data is like telling me something. I'm like, okay, now I want to go watch like those 15 guys. And so I typically do that on Thursdays, but he's definitely on the list. But I'd watch the first two games. And so a couple quick things that I would say. Number one, like, I don't think there's any doubting, like, at this point, you just have to say, okay, with the way they're running their offense and the way that Justin Herbert is playing and what we've seen from Quinton Johnston, he's clearly an upgrade. But I also understand the people that have apprehension, because essentially we really have 2 years of data saying that Quinton Johnston is not very good. You know what I mean? Now, it can take receivers 3 years to break out, so I do an article every offseason about breakout potential for wide receivers, and I bucket them into early breakouts, which are the first 3 years, and then late breakouts, right? So that happens like years 4 to 7 for these guys. And when I did all of Quinton Johnston's comps, like, it wasn't ideal, but there was a chance. Like, there was still this chance he would break out. So I kind of still harken back to that. Like, it does feel like it's happening, but I will say, like, the way they're scheming him up, and again, I've not watched week 3 yet. He's not like going out there and winning one-on-one. Like, he's getting busted coverages. They are using him really in a good way, like letting him run these crossers. They'll bring him behind the line of scrimmage, just throw him a real quick thing in the flat, because he is amazing after the catch. So I do think right now, like, the way I would view him is he is still a little bit more scheme dependent. Like, is he going to continue to operate with someone that will use him the way he needs to be used? But I will tell you this, like, Justin Herbert clearly trusts him at a different level now than what he did last year. Last year, he caught touchdowns. He was very used in the end zone. Like, he's one of the league leaders in end zone target percentage for his team and things like that, which led to some good games for Quinton Johnston. But the other thing I really like, Theo, about the way they're using him is I feel like it's getting him a lot of clean looks, because he has hand issues. Like, even when you watch the way he catches the ball and his hand positioning, even this year, like, I think eventually, like, some of that will still be an issue. But overall, man, he's just such a good playmaker after the catch, and that's the way they're using him. So I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Like, there is a world where I would be in a certain dynasty league that I would sell high on Quinton Johnston, because it all just depends on what's being offered to you. But there's also a world where I would be, buying high, essentially, depending on what that price tag was.
Yeah, and I think it's also, just speaking from a portfolio perspective, if you're a high volume dynasty player, having some Quinton Johnston, I think could end up being an important one. And year 3 breakouts, it's so funny, Dwain. If we were doing this 10 years ago, we'd be talking about all these year 3. It's like now at year 3 breakouts, like, illegal. But
we need year
Collins,
1.
Year one, or I don't have any interest in you whatsoever. Shout out Roma Dunze. That got some people in trouble. Nico Collins, Jamison Williams. We've had year 3. Now Quinton Johnston. Stranger things have happened. Your very quick thoughts on Oronde Gadsden. Obviously, a ton of target competition, but there's been some excessively positive coach speak, some positivity from Justin Herbert. It's the kind of tight end profile that we really, really like. Hyper athletic, sort of overgrown wide receiver. Had a ton of college production at Syracuse. is this a contingent upside stash for if Keenan Allen breaks down, or for that matter, if Quinton Johnston misses time? Gadsden looks good, and they used him after completely ignoring the tight end position for 2 weeks. Gadsden also plays a big role in that Denver game.
Yeah, I mean, another guy that finally got his opportunity to be on the field, and Justin Herbert clearly trusts him. I mean, he had a 40% targets per route run. He had 15% target share on 28% route participation. So I think the way that they're operating their offense, Theo, is the other real key here, right? When we're talking about a team that ranks second in drop back rate over expected in the NFL right now, actually tied, for first. So they're throwing the ball a lot more than what a lot of people anticipated, even though they were a positive drop back over expected team last year after Justin Herbert got healthy after the bye, but they've taken it to another level this year. And it's like, they've just, I think, embraced the fact that hey, we have Justin Herbert and we really like all these weapons, and Gadsden is another one. So if they were more of that old mold of really a Harbaugh kind of offense / Greg Roman offense where your tight ends are going to have to do a lot of blocking, I would still say Gadsden, carries contingent upside, but I would be a little more pessimistic, right? Because it would be how's he going to get on the field enough with all the blocking duties they're going to want these guys to handle? But if one of those other players were to go down, specifically like Keenan, Gadsden could plug immediately into this version of the offense that they're running, because Will Disley and Tyler Conklin, they may be called tight ends, but that's a different, Gadsden's really more of a wide receiver.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. He's more like a Harold Fannin. That Gadsden's more along the archetype of a Harold Fannin Jr. So yeah, man, I do think there's contingent upside here. I saw him go last night in an FFPC league, just season long, for $450 or something like that. I thought we were swooping in with some nice little bids, and some people just went nuclear on him. I don't know that he'll pay that off this year. I think you're going to need an injury for that to occur, but man, the talent looks really good so far.
Yeah, he was a wild variance on Fab Bids guy in FFPC leagues in Dynasty and
10 to 500.
In Dynasty, there was some 80 percenters in FFPC leagues. He was out there. You can understand the Dynasty one, and then in some main event ones, there was 8%. Guys were winning him for 8%, 7%, and then you'd see, like you said, a 40%. There's definitely a hive for Oronde Gadsden. I would say I'm not part of the hive, but I am very much into, he's very talented. This thing could work out. And we have Justin Herbert. We have Vernon Davis's former head coach during peak Vernon Davis time, peak Mark Andrews offensive coordinator. There's just so much organizationally where this could actually happen. So I love having him as a bench stash. And if he's available to you in any of your leagues as sort of a backup tight end option for you, I think you should pack some bags of Oronde Gadsden. All right, Dwain, we talked about it before. TreVeyon Henderson, Ramondre Stevenson, multiple fumbles this past week. This was something that was a big problem for Stevenson in 2024. Stevenson's had a very strong start to the year otherwise, but TreVeyon Henderson was a rocket ship to the moon in redraft leagues. In dynasty leagues, being valued as an RB1. Fantasy managers are ready for the breakout week. Is it coming this week?
Well, I think we have as good a chance as any because of what you mentioned. And believe me, I'm ready for it to happen because I was touting TreVeyon Henderson. And I don't think any of the reasons that I was touting TreVeyon Henderson are particularly wrong. It was all around a talent profile on an offense that needs playmakers. I think those things are still all true. I think he's a very talented player, and I think the Patriots have a bunch of scrubs, man. They need someone to help ignite the offense. Yeah, Hunter Henry went off for 29 fantasy points. We'll see if that happens again this year, guys. Drake May's playing well, but I mean, we're not getting anything from Kyle Williams yet. Stephon Diggs still not even playing a full-time role. Route participation under 60%. Kayshon Boutte is kind of a one-trick pony. Everybody got all excited. Not a high-end target earner. They need something that can bring electricity to their offense. And when you look at what happened with the fumbles last week, 2 of them from Ramondre Stevenson. And the sad part is the next dude in was Antonio Gibson. So Mike Vrabel just playing this very I don't know. I don't know what Henderson did to him or a family member, but really just keeping their early second round pick, in the back end of the fold was just, it's kind of weird, but we see it happen to rookies all the time. And we talk about it with rookies. I totally get it. when you take someone now, home leagues, you were getting Henderson in round 4, 5, sometimes middle of round 5. Like you can stomach it more, but you know how it was in high stakes. If you wanted TreVeyon Henderson, man, round 3.
2-3 turn in Vegas. 2-3 turn in Vegas.
That's where you had to do it. And if you took him there, which I did multiple times, me and Ian Harditz, I took him on a main event team at that 2-3 turn as well. It's been brutal to start the season. But now that these fumbles have occurred, we also got a report on Wednesday that he was the first man up in practice. Now, that doesn't always mean anything, but if there's going to be a week where he suddenly takes over the backfield, right, and it's not a gradual thing over the course of the season, like, it's perfectly unfolded before him here. Last week, after we had those fumbles, he handled 84% of the snaps on the next 3 drives. He accounted for 90% of the rushing attempts, and he had a 71% route participation. And I put that out there, and I said, guys, I don't have any clue what this means for next week. But it's not bad. This isn't bad. At least we can have some hope here. What's funny, though, Theo, is when you put a tweet like that out, immediately all the people that have their hardline response, which is some, it's Henderson time. He's taking over. Others, he's a scrub. He's going to be the RB3 the rest of the season. And the point is, like, we really don't know, but the talent profile is still there. And now these events have unfolded that could potentially open the door for him to take over.
Yeah, for me, it's really the route participation. Obviously, he's an explosive runner, big playability, but it's the ability as a receiver that I think is the thesis when it comes to Henderson for the rest of the season. I think this is the last week where you're going to be able to potentially buy him for 85 cents on the dollar based on what you would have paid for him at the end of August. I really do believe that the breakout is coming. And once that sort of happens, it's going to be really hard for New England to sort of put that back in the box because, again, he's going to take a lot of pressure off of Drake May in this offense because of his explosive ability. Really rooting for this one, Dwain. So hopefully we're really happy about it. Happy about it on Monday would be a great one for TreVeyon Henderson. Another running back who is moving up and up and up is Cam Skattebo. Everybody listening to this knows Cam Skattebo's gained some dynasty value. Cam Skattebo is a guy you're putting in your fantasy lineups this week. But I had Jacob Gibbs on Fantasy Football Daily. Actually, it was Ryan Heath and Jacob Gibbs joined us. It was sort of it was very, very Scott Barrett, Dwain McFarland, very data-driven. You would have loved it, Dwain. But Jacob said one thing that made me nearly throw up was who scores more points the rest of the season, Cam Skattebo or Ashton Genty? So I'm asking you the same question. I think Jacob said it, and he sort of acquiesced that it'll be Genty, but it's pretty close. Skattebo looked really good. What's your expectations for him this season and sort of moving forward? And do you have a comparison for him? Scott and I talked about it this week. I said he's kind of like David Montgomery with a little more pass-catching ability. A bunch of people in the YouTube comments said he's sort of James Conner-ish. He's a hard player to comp. He's different.
Yeah, he is. So when you look at his collegiate profile, obviously a very prolific pass catcher and a prolific touchdown scorer. And what did we see immediately once he got the opportunity after Tyrone Tracy went down with the shoulder injury? Comes out, handles 70% of the snaps, 57% of the rushing attempts, and gets a freaking 27% target share on a 66% route participation. Scores the touchdown from inside the 10-yard line. And it was like kind of a bowling ball through a bunch of pins, and he just ends up falling across it at the end. That's just the kind of player he is. Like, if you go back and watch his collegiate film, like what you've seen so far in his NFL career matches exactly what you saw in college. And this is what I'm going to say, man. When you have the ability to score touchdowns and catch passes, historically, that has been an excellent thing. Those are massive pillars to upside, floor, everything you want in fantasy football from a running back perspective. That's exactly what you're looking for. And Skattebo has that. Like, if you go back, essentially to 2011 and look at these guys, Theo, and now this is for a season. There have been 28 instances of running backs handling 50% or more of their team's rushing attempts and also getting a 15% target share. Just remember, last week, Skattebo had 57%, so I went below that, and then he had a 27% target share, so I went down to 15, which would still is a really good target share for a running back. Those guys have averaged 21.7 fantasy points per game since 2011. So, like, Skattebo, like, he just checks these very important boxes, man. Like, we talk about Quinshon Judkins, like really good runner, but if he were to get the passing work like what Skattebo's already getting the passing work that we hope that Quinshon might one day get. And Skattebo's actually already proven as a receiver. This guy was a massive target share guy in college. So, man, I also get why Jacob Gibbs, who I also love. Obviously, I love Ryan Heath as well. But, like, I get why he paused. Now, the one thing is when Tyrone Tracy eventually makes it back, like, does he eat into what we're getting with Skattebo versus what we have?
Does
with
he
Genty?
Though? Why,
Yeah,
that's my question.
I don't know. I mean, we try to say we know these things, but we don't. We just don't. So I've done research on this. Players that are scoring a lot of fantasy points, or players that have been highly efficient, or they're doing all these things, like how much of a predictor is it to them continuing to get more work? Like, it's very sporadic. Like, in certain cases it's a yes, in other cases it's been a no. I think the simple narrative is Skattebo comes out and just, if he plays really well, he takes over the backfield. I think it certainly could happen, but it's just hard to know.
Yeah, it's Skattebo's, like, he's really good. And you mentioned the receiving, and they're moving him around to get him the ball as a receiver. Now you talked about Jaxson Dart sort of elevating the offense. I'm into it. I think Cam Skattebo, if you have him in Dynasty, you should be thrilled about it because you took him in the second round of your rookie drafts. And the fact that Tracy was there created this period of time where he was a little bit discounted in some of these startups, where there was also sort of a Tracy hive out there. And Tracy's a good player. Tracy was very good for us last year in fantasy, but Skattebo just has that it factor. The college production, you can't even compare it. The draft capital, he was drafted ahead of where Tracy was drafted. And Tracy had the fumble issues last year and the drop issues that we have yet to see with Skattebo. So I'm very much into it. One running back a little bit off the radar here. We've talked about tons of rookie running backs, but we need to talk about Woody Marks. Houston's sort of a disaster right now offensively. Nick Chubb, it's not the guy long-term here, at least for even a seasonal. Chubb is 29 years old. Real body age might be like 36 after all the injuries. And Woody Marks has some traits to him that are very fantasy friendly. We've started to see the snaps tick up. We've seen some flashes of Woody Marks' potential. Where are you at on Marks? Obviously, I don't think he's going to hit a Judkins or Skattebo-like output, but I do think he could have a lot of utility for dynasty managers and redraft managers rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, we say he can't, but like if something happens to Chubb, if Chubb, is underperforming and the coaches decide they want to make a change, I mean, Woody Marks is clearly already moving in the right direction here. His utilization has improved every single game. So last week he obviously hit his highs. It was the crescendo week for him. He had 40% of the team's rushing attempts, 44% route participation, and he had a 6% target share. So it's essentially turned into a two-way split right now between Chubb and what we're getting from Marks. And Marks was a very prolific receiver coming out of college. Not quite the accomplished, stats on the ground, but those honestly don't matter as much, right, as what we've seen from these players as far as what they can do as, receivers out of the backfield in college. It's the more important component in the rookie supermodel. I know JJ Zachariason also talks about that. I think he actually changed his model this offseason because he and I were going back and forth like in DMs. And, he actually took rushing out. And he just has all receiving in there and he's right. Like when I look at the data too, like it's so heavily weighted towards what these guys can do as receivers, which takes us back to the Skattebo thing versus the Judkins and the way that we're like looking at how we would actually profile these guys and how we would project them moving forward. But, Mark's like, if he suddenly did get work on the ground, we already know he can be a good receiver, and that's just massively valuable. Now Mixon's the wild card. We don't know anything. They're not telling us anything about Mixon, so where are you at with Mixon? Are you just assuming he's done?
I'm assuming he's complete dust for this season. And from a dynasty perspective, I don't necessarily see Mixon. Maybe Mixon is next year's Nick Chubb and he sort of matriculates somewhere. Maybe it's Houston. But there's just terrible vibes when it comes to Mixon. I don't think he plays it down this year. Marks is really, really interesting because you bring up what if it doesn't, the rushing production. He was sort of a guy who just caught a lot of passes. And when I say caught a lot of passes, he had more receptions as a collegiate than any back in this class by a wide margin. He had an 80-plus reception season under Mike Leach at Mississippi State, RIP Mike Leach. But that just shows you how long he was in college. But last year, he did take a step forward as a runner, had 1,000 plus rushing yards at USC. So was able to get that done in the Big Ten. It took him a while, and we like seeing the early breakouts from these guys, but it doesn't matter. We have seen that in the profile. So Woody Marks, I think, is especially interesting. And of all the rookies we talked about, he's really the only one that you can buy pretty low right now in Dynasty, and in redraft, you can trade for him as well. And I think that could end up happening. All right, Dwain, not trying to cause a painful moment for you, but CeeDee Lamb now is going to miss some time. I don't even know how many games here. It seems like every time we get a news drop, it gets kind of worse and worse with this ankle. 4 weeks, 6 weeks. CeeDee Lamb says he's fine, but the vibes don't feel that way. Who is the bigger beneficiary, George Pickens or Jake Ferguson? Whether you're a dynasty manager, a redraft manager, dynasty, Ferguson has a chance with the room to run up the dynasty tight end rankings. He has contract insulation now, and he's going to play alongside Dak Prescott for the near future. Pickens is interesting because he's had back-to-back solid weeks with identical production. And can he take his game to the next level and maybe be used a little bit differently? Sort of been used exactly the same way all season long. Now with Lamb out, is there a little more versatility potentially with Pickens? And Pickens, from a dynasty lens, could end up being a massive, massive player to watch for this offseason because of his upcoming free agent status. Where are you at on which player, or is it both of them, benefits the most from Lamb missing time?
Yeah, I really do think it's both of them. But obviously, like when we think about ceiling, Pickens is the guy that like could blow the roof off, just because of his potential to catch the touchdowns, right? He's already tied with Devontae Adams for the most end zone targets per game for the season. So he's clearly a priority for the Cowboys down inside the red zone. Did catch a touchdown pass last weekend. But my only concern, like with Pickens, right, is one, he still hasn't had the big target share game. And if we go back and look at him over the course of his career, like he's been good to really good, but he's never truly shown to be great, right? And that's part of probably why the Steelers moved on. If you look at this weekend, like the Cowboys, it's a tough matchup against Green Bay. I mean, if you're broadening out and looking more over the next 4 to 5 games, and guys, just remember, like even when CeeDee Lamb comes back, like, these high ankle sprains have a tendency to linger. Like these guys don't immediately look like they used to look. It might take even longer than that. Sometimes they never look the same for the rest of the season. Like I hope that's not the case with CeeDee Lamb. I have him on a main event team, Theo, so I'm wanting him to get back and look great.
I have him in the New York Super in the NFFC.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very, very painful. It's very sobering what you're saying here, Dwain, about Lamb for sure. But yeah, you're right. It doesn't always work out. I love what you said about Pickens, because I think Ferguson's been the answer that a lot of people have leaned into. And I'm curious your thoughts on Ferguson, because obviously he had the huge target total in week 3. But when we look at how Pittsburgh used Pickens, just from a target share, air yard share, first read rate, if those numbers translate to Dak Prescott in Dallas, now that they have some time to prepare for no Lamb, then Pickens could have some massive spike weeks.
Yeah, even if he doesn't have like a 25% target share, like if they just throw the ball as much as they've been throwing the ball. Now they've been a little bit more run heavy once they get down inside, the 10-yard line, which really is a trend that's been going on for the last 2 years. They've been willing to run the ball despite not having great running backs. So that hurts a little bit. But yeah, even if Pickens is like at a 20% target share and the Cowboys have to throw the ball as much as they are because their defense can stop absolutely no one, like to your point, like just the extra passing volume alone is going to be enough to push Pickens up. Now, if Pickens were to also take a step forward as a player and suddenly have a 23, 24% target share plus all that extra volume, that's how he ultimately booms. That's how he just kind of like sets fantasy leagues on fire for 3 or 4 weeks until we get CD Lamb back. And then whenever you look at, Ferguson, the interesting thing with him is really like, even before we lost Lamb, like he was just getting a lot of targets already this year. I mean, he's at a 26% target share on the season, a 32% targets per route run. So his game so far this season has gone to a new level. Like I always viewed him more as like a borderline tight end 1, high end tight end 2, low end tight end 1, somewhere in that range. I think someone could argue for like any one of those things. But it never been like this elite target share earner. Now they obviously paid the man, couldn't pay Micah Parsons, but we got Jake Ferguson paid, we got Deron Bland paid, made sure we got those things. Nice going, Jerry. But Ferguson's taking a step forward, and they're not just hitting him on these seam routes and things like this, using him all over the field. His average depth of target is 4.9. And that's the key thing. He's operating a lot underneath the defense this season, not just challenging things vertically. And part of that's probably because of the arrival of Pickens, right? So Pickens working more of the vertical stuff, even though his average depth of target is down. CD Lamb's going to work the intermediate. And it's like, okay, our third guy is going to be Ferguson working really more underneath. And it's just really worked to his benefit.
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you. Ferguson, I sort of viewed as a compiler, a guy who really benefited from playing with Dak, and he certainly does, but he's way north of whatever we saw from Dalton Schultz during his time in Dallas as a player. And we did see Schultz with like a top 5 tight end. I believe he was the tight end 3 one season with Prescott. So Ferguson could end up with a really big year. I'm very interested in seeing how Pickens and Ferguson do against this very tough Green Bay defense and sort of beyond here. Let's go rapid fire on these ones. True or false? Rome Odunze finishes as a wide receiver 1 this season.
Yes, true.
I think I'm with you. I think Rome Odunze is headed in that direction. Which player would you rather roster right now in Dynasty? Luther Burden or Matthew Golden?
Matthew Golden.
Matthew Golden. Okay, so yeah.
I really love Luther Burden too, but Golden is still in the situation, and I think it could break loose this week for him. Had his highest route participation last week. We've got Jaden Reed on IR for like another 5 weeks. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Matthew Golden because he's already getting the playing time. I could end up being wrong on that one, like long term, but I just feel like it's Matthew Golden week this week.
And that's an actionable one because I think that are way more people who are into Luther Burden from a dynasty perspective than Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden sort of looked at as an opportunistic wide receiver 1 who landed correctly. And Burden, the whole idea is he's going to end up being this slot demon under Ben Johnson. I think both could end up being really, really good dynasty assets. But Golden's super interesting, Dwain. And I think the whole narrative about Golden this week might have been a little different if he was a little more aware of what was in front of him and didn't take that out of bounds, where it looked like one of those catches he had about 30 yards in front of him, instead goes out of bounds. So Golden this week, potentially really fun one. We've seen Dallas just get absolutely shredded by opposing quarterbacks. Caleb with 4 touchdown passes,
and
Russell Wilson.
Golden, just real quick, has had 2 other passes that might have been long bomb touchdowns that totally changes the whole narrative around this man. And imagine if those are 2 on-target passes from Jordan Love in week 2, and one of them might have been week 1, but I think they were both in week 2.
Week 2, they had the end zone target, which should have been a completion. It should have been a touchdown. That was not on Golden. It was completely on Love. And Love played well against Washington, but then it was the other one where it could have been a 90-yard touchdown. So, yeah, I'm completely with you. The Matthew Golden weeks are coming. Luther Burden, you just sort of made the argument where Rome Odunze, if he's a wide receiver 1 this year, the target competition, the wide receiver target competition is going to continually be there for Burden heading into 2026. So I think Burden's very, very talented. Golden, a little bit underrated, way more attainable in Dynasty right now than Burden. Just my kind of gut feel from most of these leagues. Keep this going. Let's go with just 1 or 2 more rapid fire. Is Brian Thomas Jr. going to turn this thing around this year? And give me a guess as to where he finishes on the year in terms of the wide receiver scoring.
Yes, I do think he's going to turn things around. I've got him in my rest of season projections as the wide receiver 13. So obviously a little bit lower than what people were hoping for, but it takes a lot of things into account, right? And so that's like, I'm shooting for medians on those. And so I still feel good about Brian Thomas Jr. Most of the things we're dealing with just aren't sticky. if we could just get like, the Shane Waldron like curse like out of the way. But guys, like Liam Cohen's still ultimately in charge. So like we're seeing a lot of the things we want. So I know we're supposed to keep this short. Yes, I think Brian Thomas Jr. turns it around.
Who will be this season's RB1 overall if you had to make a guess after 3 weeks of play?
Oh, Christian McCaffrey.
Here we go.
I mean,
there we go.
As long as he's healthy, like there's no stopping this man. I mean, dude, he's like 20 rushing attempts and 30 targets a game. It's insane, like how much. Now, obviously, some of that'll change a little bit as they get healthy with Kittle and Ayuk and these other guys. But man, like he ranks 10th in target share across all players. Like it's not just running backs. That's like against like the best receivers in the league. CMC is just doing CMC stuff.
Yeah, if you take the rushing out of it, CMC would be like a mid wide receiver 2 right now. He's unbelievable. Utilization is insane. How about wide receiver? Is this Puka Nakua's year or is there somebody else?
It's Puka. And man, Puka, I thought about putting him number 1 in the offseason, and there was just enough stuff with the Stafford, back. And like Adams arriving, but we had already seen him like thrive with Puka, with Cooper Kupp, right? Whenever Cooper Kupp was still actually, playing well before the injury last year. And then obviously in his rookie season, he was still good with Cooper Kupp. So Rams really know how to, funnel a pass offense through 2 dudes and they can both eat. Like Devontae Adams is going to be a top 12 guy and Puka is going to be the number 1. Like, I mean, and I have no reservations saying that. Puka's a great player. Is there a better scheme for wide receivers than Sean McVay? I mean, he's now playing from the slot 40% of the time. They run a ton of his targets come off of play action, which is a cheat code. He's the number 1 motion rate for guys with at least 70 routes on the season. I mean, good player getting all the cheat code buttons dialed up. And we also know Stafford's a kingmaker. So yeah, Puka easily the wide receiver 1 the rest of the way.
Yeah, I think it's Puka. The dark horses are, well, not really a dark horse. JSN, and then I will say because of Jaxson Dart, Malik Neighbors could just go wild over the course of the season. We already saw that week 2 explosion. But yeah, I think Puka would probably be, if I had to place a bet on it, it's probably Puka Nacua. But JSN pretty close for me right now, Dwain. QB1, is this Lamar Jackson with another QB1 overall finish?
Yeah, man, it's so hard to pick between Lamar and Josh Allen. Like, essentially, again, guys, we come back to archetypes, and you've really got like 4 guys that have it. Now, Jalen Hurts is not as prolific in the passing game, so like if we leave him off, and then Jaden Daniels is hurt right now, we don't know how long the knee sprain will linger, and does that impact like that dual threat component? So it really just comes down to Allen and Lamar Jackson because they're going to have a head start on Jaden Daniels at this point. So I think it could go either way. I think right now, yeah, it looks like Lamar.
And final one, tight end. Give us your prediction. Tight end's always a weird one where at the beginning of the season, there's always a couple of guys who jump out and then always sort of like fall back a little bit in the pack. Who would be your prediction to be the tight end 1 overall right now, Dwain?
Yeah, I mean, this is not like shocking. It's Trey McBride.
Yeah.
Like if Brock Bowers were healthy, Brock Bowers would be right there. I think the most interesting storylines at tight end this year is Tucker Kraft and Tyler Warren. And the question is, like, can those guys suddenly ascend and assert themselves into that tier? Obviously, George Kittle will be back at some point. But I think Trey McBride is just such an easy lock, man. Like, he's so good that, like, I think we almost, like, I don't know. It's like we gloss over it now because we've seen it for 2.5 years. Whereas, yeah, it's like 30% target share, just out here doing his thing. He's going to get his looks every week. And, hey, scored a touchdown already this season. How about that? That's
you love seeing that. You absolutely love seeing Trey McBride find the end zone and not have to wait like most of the season for it.
I do think once Kittle's back, if he's fully healthy, like it wouldn't surprise me at all. Like from that point on, Kittle just went on a run to be the dude.
Yeah, Kittle for sure. Points per game basis could get there, but I think McBride is probably the best bet. Agree with you on all these. Wide receiver, I brought up JSN. Running back, I'll bring up Jonathan Taylor just because he looks sort of like this year's Saquon Barkley. Great. But yeah, CMC with the receiving work, it's hard to beat that. Dwain, this was a lot of fun. Let me know once again what you have coming out, where they can find your work.
Yeah, you guys just go over to fantasylife.com. All my articles are for free. If you guys are interested in the utilization tools, you can get 20% off with the code Dwain, DWAIN. I put out most of my content on Mondays through Wednesdays. You can find me on social media at Dwain McFarland.
Yeah, and make sure you check out Fantasy Football Daily. Check out the episode I did with Ryan Heath and Jacob Gibbs. That was a really, really fun one. If you enjoyed hearing Dwain talk analytics, statistics, you're going to really enjoy that one. Also, every week, Fantasy Football Daily, dropping a waiver wire pod with Joe Dolan and Tom Brawley, dropping a start sit with Graham Barfield, and then my solo pod, recording that Sunday evenings, drops Monday morning. School of Scott every single week. Scott Barrett and myself, we're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.